"Security's on the way," the flight attendant snapped into her radio. "We have a minor trying to claim a first-class seat. Might be fraud." Zuri stood still. One hand gripped the strap of her backpack. The other held out her boarding pass. Her voice was calm. "I didn't do anything wrong." "And I didn't ask for attitude," the woman shot back, crossing her arms. "This is seat 1A. You can't just walk in here." The cabin grew quiet. A man 2 rows behind looked up from his tablet. Someone started filming. Zuri didn't cry. She didn't move. She just waited. For something, or someone. And she had exactly 2 minutes before everything changed. 12 hours earlier, this had just been another school break trip. Now, Zuri Langston was about to flip the entire airline industry upside down, without raising her voice. Zuri wasn't supposed to be a headline. She wasn't loud, wasn't flashy, and never wanted to be the center of attention. But here she was, 13 years old, 5'1", and alone in the middle of a luxury cabin designed for CEOs and celebrities, being treated like a criminal because she had the wrong skin, the wrong age, and the wrong kind of confidence. She stood at the entrance of Aurora Link Flight 342, headed from Denver to New York City. In her hand was a first-class boarding pass, clearly marked Zuri Langston, Seat 1A. The boarding agent had scanned her without issue. No alarms, no problems. But the moment Zuri stepped past the threshold into the plush, champagne-scented cabin, everything shifted. "Excuse me," a flight attendant said sharply, stepping in front of her. She was tall, blonde, and wore a perfect red lip. Her name tag read Rachel. Zuri paused. "Yes?" Rachel smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "First class is for premium adult travelers, sweetie. This section isn't open to kids traveling alone." Zuri blinked. "I have a ticket." Rachel didn't even look at it. "That can't be right." Zuri calmly held it up. Rachel took one glance and shook her head like she was brushing off a bug. "1A, she scoffed. "Who booked this for you?" Zuri didn't flinch. "I did. Well, my guardian did. But it's in my name." Behind her, the line of boarding passengers slowed to a crawl. A businessman cleared his throat. An older couple looked over curiously. Someone whispered, "What's going on?" Rachel tilted her head. "Is your mom or dad flying with you?" "No, I'm traveling alone, with approval. That's not standard for unaccompanied minors." "I'm not standard," Zuri said quietly. That did it. Rachel's expression flattened. "Wait here." She pulled out a radio and turned away. "Hey Daniel, can you come to the front? We've got a passenger claiming 1A, 13. Looks like a mix-up." A mix-up. That's what they always called it. Zuri tightened her grip on her backpack. Her thumb brushed against the side pocket, where the silver card rested. Flat, cold, smooth, untouched. She could still hear her mother's voice, low and steady. "Only use it if you're completely alone. If something happens and you know the system won't protect you, that card will." Rachel returned with a man in a dark navy vest and earpiece. Daniel, the flight supervisor. He looked Zuri up and down. "Boarding pass?" Zuri handed it over without a word. Daniel studied it, then glanced at her. "And your ID?" She produced her school ID and a passport. Everything matched. But Daniel hesitated. "It's probably a booking error," Rachel offered. "Or someone used points. I've seen it before." "She might have printed this at home," Daniel murmured, loud enough for passengers to hear. Zuri felt heat rise in her chest, but she held her ground. "It's a confirmed seat. I'm not moving." Daniel stiffened. "Young lady, I'm going to need you to wait here while we call it in. If it doesn't check out, we'll have to escort you out of the aircraft." There it was, the line, the threat. Zuri looked past them, past the suspicious eyes and the whispering passengers, and straight at seat 1A. It wasn't just a seat. It was her mother's legacy. The last time Maya Langston, her mom, had boarded an Aurora Link flight, it was in uniform. She'd been a decorated pilot, one of the best in the country. But when a corporate exec decided she didn't fit the image for the airline's premium campaign, she was quietly reassigned, then slowly pushed out. 6 months later, her plane had suffered a mechanical failure en route to Salt Lake City. FAA ruled it a system error. The airline denied all accountability, and Zuri lost the only parent she had left. But before Maya died, she left behind a sealed envelope, a passcode, and a warning. This industry won't always play fair, but I didn't spend my life building tools for justice just to let them die with me. Inside that envelope had been a card, one no one else had, a final access token, the last key to the system her mother had spent 10 years building, a digital ethics network called Ethos Track. Zuri had kept it with her ever since, and now, standing in a sea of suits, stares, and suspicion, she felt her fingers move, slowly, toward her jacket pocket. Captain Foster stepped out of the cockpit at that moment. He scanned the situation instantly. His eyes flicked from Rachel to Daniel to Zuri. "What's going on here?" he asked. "She's trying to sit in 1A, Rachel answered quickly. "We think the ticket's been misused, possibly fake." Captain Foster frowned. "Is it scanned and confirmed?" Daniel hesitated. "Technically, yes, but we're still verifying." Zuri took a breath, stepped forward, and offered the silver card. "Scan this, please," she said. Her voice was calm, but her hand trembled slightly. The captain hesitated. "What is this?" She looked up at him, her mother's eyes, steady and sharp. "It's legacy protocol," Zuri said. "Registered to Maya Langston. I'm her daughter." The air shifted. Foster scanned the card. His screen blinked once, then turned red. "Access granted. Final override. Langston Legacy initiated authorized user, Zuri L. Ethos Track Master System, Live." The cabin went silent. Daniel took a step back. Rachel's jaw went slack. Someone gasped. Zuri said nothing. She walked past them, straight to seat 1A, sat down, fastened her seatbelt, and waited for the storm she had just quietly unleashed. For a full 30 seconds, no one in the first-class cabin moved. Zuri sat in seat 1A, small and composed, her backpack tucked at her feet. Her hands were folded neatly in her lap. The silver access card rested face down on the small oak-paneled tray table in front of her, as if daring someone to try and take it. Captain Foster hadn't said a word since scanning the card. Rachel, the flight attendant, still stood stiffly at the front of the cabin, arms crossed and face flushed. No longer from condescension, but confusion and discomfort. Daniel, the supervisor, had quietly stepped back, as if trying to become invisible. And then came the shift. It wasn't loud. No shouting. No grand speech. It was the way Captain Foster turned toward Rachel with a look that made her spine straighten. "Return to your position," he said, calm but cold. "You've done enough." Rachel blinked. "But, sir..." That was not a request. She swallowed hard and backed away. The captain turned to Zuri. "Miss Langston, is there anything else you need at this time?" Zuri shook her head gently. "No, thank you," he nodded. "Welcome aboard." And then, without another word, he returned to the cockpit. The overhead chime sounded. "Cabin crew, prepare for takeoff." Just like that, the show was over. Or so they thought. From her seat by the window, Zuri watched the plane pull away from the gate. Outside, snow flurries drifted lazily across the tarmac, unaware that a girl with a silver card had just shaken the foundation of the very airline they were about to launch into the sky. Inside, however, things weren't quite so calm. Passengers who had witnessed the exchange whispered behind tablet screens. The man in seat 2C, who had filmed the entire thing, was now uploading the footage. He'd already drafted the caption, "Teen Black Girl Denied First-Class Seat, Until This Happened." The internet was already spinning and Zuri hadn't even taken off yet. But Zuri wasn't paying attention to any of that. She didn't know she was being filmed. She didn't care that someone just posted a video of her face on TikTok. She was thinking about her mom. Maya Langston wasn't just a pilot. She had been one of the few black women in aviation leadership. A systems engineer turned captain, Maya had spent most of her life designing better, safer airline procedures, and most of her career watching them get ignored. When Zuri was 10, she remembered sitting at the kitchen table late at night, eating cereal while her mom sketched out something on a legal pad. "What's that?" she had asked, legs swinging off the chair. Her mom didn't even look up. "A system," she said. "For what?" Maya leaned back and tapped her pen. "To measure how people behave when no one's watching. Ethics, fairness, how crews treat passengers, how airlines make decisions when they think no one's paying attention." Zuri frowned. "Is that possible?" Maya smiled then. Not a big smile, just the kind she wore when she knew something no one else did. "It will be," she'd said. "Someday. It'll need a guardian, though." Zuri didn't understand what that meant at the time, but she remembered the words. It'll need a guardian. She never expected she would be that guardian. 30 minutes into the flight, Rachel hadn't made eye contact with Zuri once. She didn't offer her a drink, didn't offer a snack. She served every other passenger around her with forced smiles and exaggerated friendliness, skipping Zuri's row like she wasn't even there. It was fine. Zuri didn't want sparkling water or warmed mixed nuts. She wanted dignity, and she'd already reclaimed it the moment Captain Foster scanned her card. But the silence, that's what struck Zuri most. No one apologized. No one said they were sorry for assuming, for accusing, for trying to have her removed. Even now, the passengers around her were pretending like nothing had happened, like a 13-year-old hadn't just pulled the lever on something far bigger than a seat dispute. That, she realized, was the real problem. People didn't fear accountability. They feared disruption, and she had disrupted everything. Meanwhile, in the airline's operations center in Atlanta, an alert pinged across a secure terminal. Ethos track override detected. Legacy protocol unlocked. Authenticated user, Zuri Langston. Impact zone, global, Tier 2 network systems. The technician on duty, a man in his 40s named Greg, blinked twice. He recognized the access code. He picked up the phone immediately. "Get me FAA liaison, now." Back in the cabin, a chime sounded. A second flight attendant, older, kinder, came by Zuri's seat. Her name tag read Clara. She leaned in with a warm smile. "Hi there, sweetheart. Can I get you something to drink?" Zuri looked up, surprised. "Just water, please," she said softly. Clara nodded. "Of course. And Zuri, I'm sorry. I saw what happened. It shouldn't have." Zuri didn't speak at first. Then she nodded, just once. Clara returned with a cold glass of water and a small packet of shortbread cookies. It was the first human gesture Zuri had received all day, and she was grateful. But she also knew the kindness came from one person. Not the system. Not yet. By the time the plane reached cruising altitude over Chicago, Zuri pulled her mother's old tablet from her backpack. It still had the custom interface Maya had designed for Ethos Track. Clean lines, real-time airline behavior dashboards, encrypted communications, and one glowing section labeled Legacy Protocol Active. She tapped into it. A system alert flashed. Pending verification chain. 94 flights impacted. 740 members ESG credit line frozen. FAA review in progress. Zuri exhaled slowly. She wasn't scared. She was ready. This wasn't just about being mistreated on one flight. It wasn't just about a rude flight attendant or a passive supervisor. It was about the system that let it happen. Again, and again, and again. Zuri knew the weight of what she'd triggered, but she also knew something else. Her mom had built Ethos Track for this, and Zuri had just made sure the world would finally have to face it. At that very moment, Inside the FAA's ethics division, an emergency meeting was called. By protocol, any activation of a legacy protocol required immediate review. The lead administrator, a woman named Karen Ramos, opened the case file. When she saw the name Zuri Langston, she stopped cold. Maya Langston's daughter, the woman they had once called too disruptive for executive promotion. The pilot who had designed the very ethics network they now quietly depended on, but had never publicly credited. Karen whispered to herself, "She lit the fuse." Zuri closed her eyes. Somewhere between 30,000 feet and the edge of what used to be normal, she smiled. Her mom was gone, but her voice, her work, was still here. And now, so was Zuri. Not as a victim, not as a scared little girl, but as the one person the system never expected, the child who would finish what her mother started. The first sign something had shifted came with a quiet tap on Zuri's shoulder. She turned. It was the flight supervisor, Daniel, the same man who had doubted her identity just an hour earlier. But now, his face was pale, almost apologetic. "Miss Langston," he said, voice low, "I need to verify something with you. May I speak with you privately?" Zuri looked at him, then down at the silver card still sitting on her tray. "No," she said softly but firmly. "You can speak right here." Daniel cleared his throat, eyes darting toward the other passengers. "It's a technical matter, not disciplinary." Zuri didn't move. Still no. Clara, the kind flight attendant from earlier, stepped in behind him. Her presence wasn't loud, just solid, protective, and that was all Zuri needed to stand her ground. Daniel sighed. "Very well. We've received notification from the FAA Ethics Board. They're requesting to confirm whether you initiated a legacy protocol override from this flight." Zuri met his gaze. "Yes, I did." His lips pressed into a line. "Do you understand what that triggers?" "I do." He hesitated. "There's going to be fallout." Zuri gave a tiny nod. "That's not my fault." And that was it. For the first time in years, Daniel had no rebuttal, no protocol to hide behind. Just a quiet understanding that a teenage girl had done what 100 adults never dared. Back in the cockpit, Captain Foster was reviewing a secure alert on his internal system. Impact alert. Legacy protocol verified, 94 flights flagged. 740 manned ESG bonds on hold. 3 airlines under review. FAA authorized. Operation Sky Shield. Tier 3 in effect. He ran a hand through his thinning hair. "She really pulled the plug," he muttered. His co-pilot looked over. "A 13-year-old? Foster shook his head. "No, Maya's daughter." That name still carried weight, even now. "Sir?" the co-pilot asked. "What do we do?" "We fly the route, and we don't make any mistakes," he said, switching frequencies. "From this point on, every second of this flight is being monitored by 5 different agencies." He paused, then added quietly, "We're no longer just flying passengers. We're carrying the fuse that could blow the lid off an entire industry." Meanwhile, in Atlanta, inside the Ethos Track Control Hub, Greg, the technician who had spotted the initial override, now stood in front of a room full of blinking monitors and rapidly typing engineers. "Can someone explain why 3 of our partner airlines just had their ESG compliance ratings drop to yellow?" a manager demanded. Greg tapped the screen. "They're all connected to the same behavioral cluster. One crew member was flagged for multiple unresolved violations. The system had it buried, until the override swept the pending logs." Another analyst swiveled around. "She activated the legacy wipe?" "No," Greg corrected. "Worse, she triggered full transparency mode." Everyone in the room froze. That mode was never supposed to be used. It dumped everything: staff behavior scores, passenger treatment history, ethical deviations, even internal cover-ups, directly to the FAA, the DOT, and any registered stakeholder with clearance. Greg's manager whispered, "Jesus." A junior analyst next to him muttered, God help whoever's flying her plane. Back on Flight 342, Zuri sat calmly, headphones on, tablet open, scrolling through the silent chaos she had set in motion. Her dashboard showed live results. Gate fare index, red in 12 terminals, flagged keywords trending. Racial profiling, unaccompanied minor, first-class discrimination. Video reach, 4.6 M views in 47 minutes. 3 whistleblowers reactivating their accounts. Zuri's hands trembled slightly. Not from fear, from the weight of knowing this wasn't just about her anymore. This was about every passenger who'd been disrespected, every employee silenced, every glitch brushed under the rug. Her fingers hovered over the final prompt on screen. Do you wish to transmit Langston memo to FAA Ethics Board? Yes. No. She paused. The Langston memo was the final document her mother had written before her death. A scathing, thoroughly documented blueprint of how racial bias, passenger profiling, and unethical performance scoring were being manipulated within commercial aviation. Zuri had promised she'd only send it when there was no turning back. And now? Now the door was already off its hinges. She tapped, yes. At the FAA Ethics Command Center, the alert hit instantly. Confidential memo received. Langston file source, Ethostrack. Verified by root authority. An emergency board was convened within minutes. Screens lit up across the room with real-time passenger footage, compliance metrics, and crew conduct histories. At the head of the table, Karen Ramos, the same administrator who once delayed Maya Langston's promotion, now found herself reading Maya's voice posthumously. This system is not broken. It's performing exactly as it was designed, to reward silence, punish whistleblowers, and protect brands instead of people. If you're reading this, it means my daughter has more courage than this industry ever did. Karen leaned back, shaken. Get the Attorney General on the line, she said. While all this unfolded at 35,000 feet and across multiple agencies, Zuri noticed something strange. Rachel, the flight attendant who had humiliated her, hadn't returned once since takeoff. No eye contact, no interaction, until now. She reappeared with a tray, lips tight. Would you like dinner? She asked, mechanical, voice devoid of emotion. Zuri blinked. Now you see me? She said quietly. Rachel flinched. I was following procedure. Zuri tilted her head. Was that what you were doing when you tried to have me removed from my seat? Rachel hesitated. I didn't know who you were. Zuri gave a sad smile. That's the problem. You thought you did. Rachel stood there for a second too long, then placed the tray down, carefully, and walked away. Zuri didn't touch the food. Instead, she looked out the window. Below, the clouds drifted silently, unaware that above them, a young girl was rewriting the rules of power. At that exact moment, the airline's corporate boardroom in New York lit up with flashing alerts. The CFO slammed a tablet down. We just lost 110 members in overnight ESG capital. 3 airports just suspended partnership evaluations. What the hell is going on? The head of public relations glanced at the trending topics. Hashtag Zuri Langston is now the top global hashtag. Who? The CEO snapped. The PR director looked up grimly. You just tried to remove the daughter of Maya Langston from your first-class cabin on camera with racial bias implications during ESG Compliance Week. A full silence fell over the room. We're dead, someone whispered. On board, Zuri opened her mom's final voice note. She hadn't listened to it before. Now she did. Baby girl, I don't know when you'll hear this, but if you do, it means the world didn't do right by you. That's not your fault. That's their failure. But don't let them break you. You weren't born to be quiet. You were born to keep the sky honest. Tears welled up in Zuri's eyes, but none fell. She had no time for tears, because she had just begun. Zuri didn't expect the turbulence, not in the sky, in the world below. As Flight 342 continued its path toward New York, the ripple effect of the legacy protocol was no longer digital. It was visceral, physical, real. At 37,000 feet, Zuri looked out the window and saw nothing but calm skies. Yet across the nation, airport terminals lit up red. Airline dashboards began issuing auto-locks. Compliance centers were scrambling. And back in Atlanta, the control hub that housed Ethos Track looked like a NASA command center in crisis. Greg's hands flew over the keyboard as he monitored cascading ethics scores tanking across the airline's network. "Jesus," he muttered. They didn't know she still had activation rights. His supervisor leaned over, reading the real-time alerts. Alert: 152 flights flagged. Compliance threshold breached. 3 airlines on watch list. $880 million in ESG funding suspended. Who the hell did they mess with? The man whispered. Greg's voice was low. Maya Langston's kid. The room fell into complete silence. Meanwhile, inside FAA's ethics division in Washington, D.C., Administrator Karen Ramos stood in front of a large live wall showing real-time fallout. Every line, every chart, every flickering map light, all traced back to one flight. Aurora Link 342, Seat 1A. She turned to her aide. "Tell me again how we let this happen." Her aide shook his head. "No one knew she was on that flight. She wasn't listed as a VIP. The child used her regular name. No facial recognition alert? Denied by the legal system. Per Maya's will, Zuri's access had to be non-intrusive until necessary. That clause allowed her to board without triggering corporate surveillance." Karen walked to the center of the room and tapped the table. "Okay, the system's been activated. The ethics grid has gone red, but the Langston memo? That's what makes this different. This isn't just a tech protocol. This is public evidence." The lead investigator stepped in. "Ma'am, if we don't take visible action by the time that plane lands, we lose all credibility." Karen narrowed her eyes. "Then it's time we let the system do what it was built to do. Call in the compliance shutdown team." Back on board, Zuri took a sip of orange juice. Clara, the kind attendant, had checked in again. "You okay, sweetheart?" she asked softly, kneeling next to Zuri's seat, away from the other crew. Zuri nodded. "I'm okay. I didn't think it happened this fast." Clara smiled gently. "Your mom was a genius, and you're just like her. You didn't just light a match. You built a fuse." Zuri looked down at the silver access card lying on the tray. Clara reached out, gently covering Zuri's hand. "I know you don't want to be in the spotlight, but I need you to know something. You just did more in 1 hour than some of us have tried to do in 20 years. Zuri blinked fast, trying to hold back tears. "They always think we're powerless." Clara nodded. "And then someone like you reminds them, silence is just preparation." In New York, the top floor of Skybridge Terminal suddenly lost access to all ethics dashboards. Terminal coordination apps were suspended. Pilots received notices of delayed departure authorization. The chief gate officer stormed into the operations room. "Why are all our flights requiring FAA manual clearance?" The technician's hands shook. "It's the Langston Protocol. Any airline below the ethics threshold is temporarily blocked from autonomous operations." "What triggered it?" A younger staffer looked up from his phone. "A girl," the officer scoffed. "A girl?" The staffer turned the phone around. On screen was a trending video of Zuri sitting quietly in seat 1A while the ethics network collapsed in real time. Zuri Langston had to keep the Sky Honest number 152 flights flagged. The officer stared at the screen, then slowly sat down. Damn. Meanwhile, Zuri got a notification. Grandmother calling. She hesitated, then answered. "Nana? Baby, what's going on?" Zuri took a breath. "I used the card." Silence. Then, "You sure?" "They were going to pull me from the seat. I couldn't just let it happen again." Her grandmother's voice was soft, but clear. "Your mother would be proud." Zuri bit her lip. "I think it's bigger now. FAA's involved. You scared? Zuri paused. A little. That means you're still human. But don't let that fear become apology. You didn't start the fire. You just pulled back the curtain. Zuri nodded, even though Nana couldn't see it. I love you, Zuri said. I love you more, baby. Call me when you land. On the plane, Rachel, the lead flight attendant, stood outside the lavatory, staring at her phone. Her inbox was flooded. HR inquiry notice, internal conduct review, passenger discrimination report, elevated to compliance tribunal. Her hands were shaking. For years, she had skated by. Subtle, smart, never blatant enough to get caught. Until now. Until a kid. She looked up toward first class and met Zuri's eyes, just for a second. Zuri didn't smile, didn't flinch, just looked. And somehow, that stung worse than any public accusation. In the final 15 minutes of the flight, something unexpected happened. Captain Foster came out of the cockpit, a rare move on any commercial flight. He walked down the aisle and stopped directly at Zuri's seat. Miss Langston, he said quietly, I just wanted to say, I served with your mom in the military. She was fierce. Zuri looked up, surprised. You knew her? He smiled. She gave a lecture at my base once, talked about building systems that can't be silenced. We all thought it was theory. Guess not. He knelt slightly to Zuri's level. You didn't just defend your seat today. You reminded the rest of us why we got into aviation in the first place. Zuri's voice was soft. To protect people. He nodded. Exactly that. As he stood up, he added, for what it's worth, the skies are better off with you up here. As the plane touched down in New York, 5 separate agencies were already on standby. FAA Ethics Division, DOJ Civil Rights Unit, ESG Financial Auditors, 2. Whistleblower Legal Defense Teams, 1 Global News Crew. The moment Zuri stepped off the plane, an agent in a suit approached. Miss Langston, we're here to escort you to a private terminal. Your presence has been requested by the FAA. Zuri nodded silently. But before walking forward, she turned back and looked at the plane that had just carried her story across the sky. She didn't need revenge. She had truth. And it was already flying faster than any aircraft ever could. The room was silent. Too silent for a room with 50 people. Thick mahogany panels lined the hearing chamber. Bronze nameplates glinted under the LED lights. And in the center of the U.S. Department of Transportation's Ethics Commission Hall sat a girl, 13 years old, small in frame, large in consequence. Zuri Langston, Seat 1A, Flight 342, Legacy Protocol. That name alone had sent shockwaves through the aviation industry. And now she was sitting before a federal oversight board, not as a defendant, but as the trigger of a reckoning. The chair of the hearing, Dr. Evelyn Monroe, tapped her gavel lightly. We are here to review the events surrounding Aurora Link Flight 342, the reactivation of the Langston Protocol, and the consequences that followed. Miss Langston, thank you for coming today. Zuri adjusted the microphone in front of her. Her hands were still, resting in her lap. I didn't know it would go this far, she said. There was no apology in her tone, just truth. Dr. Monroe nodded. And yet, here we are. To the left, media sat behind glass, scribbling on digital notepads. To the right, attorneys from 4 major airlines shifted in their seats. They were sweating. Not from heat, but from the weight of what this child had done in under 3 hours. Triggered $880 million in ESG-backed funding freezes. Flagged 152 flights under ethics violation protocols. Exposed a gap in the passenger dignity compliance system, caused 3 major airports to temporarily suspend auto clearance for airlines with low ethics ratings, and all of it without raising her voice. Dr. Monroe continued. Zuri, would you mind telling us, in your own words, what happened on that plane? Zuri took a breath. They told me I didn't belong there, that I couldn't sit in 1A because I was too young, and because I didn't look like someone who should be in that seat. She didn't cry, but her voice held an edge that sliced through the room. They didn't check the system, they didn't scan my ID, they just decided based on what they saw. And what do you think they saw? Dr. Monroe asked softly. Zuri looked her dead in the eye. A black kid in a space they thought was reserved for someone else. There it was, unfiltered, precise, clean. The crowd shifted. One of the commissioners cleared his throat. Miss Langston, did you know that your activation of the Langston Protocol would result in millions of dollars being frozen? Flights delayed? Contracts suspended? Zuri turned toward him. I knew that if I let it slide, it would happen again, to someone else. Maybe someone without a card, without a last name that means anything. She paused. I used the tools my mom built. She didn't design them to punish. She designed them to protect people who don't get second chances. A murmur of agreement rippled through the public gallery. Across the aisle, one of the airline attorneys whispered to another, "This kid is going to ruin us." His colleague shook his head. "No, she's going to force us to change." After her testimony, Dr. Monroe called a recess. Zuri stepped into the hallway, where Clara, the flight attendant who had stood by her, was waiting. "You were incredible," Clara whispered. "I was nervous," Zuri admitted. Clara smiled. "You didn't show it. You reminded the whole country that grace can be louder than shouting." In another room, a DOJ civil rights investigator reviewed internal footage from the flight, including Rachel's confrontation. The footage was damning. Rachel had rolled her eyes, raised her voice, used language that, while not outright abusive, was laced with assumptions. "You sure this is your seat? Let's not cause a scene, honey. Security will sort this out." The DOJ agent took notes. Rachel's file was marked, "Pending federal sanctions, passenger discrimination case." Back in the chamber, FAA Administrator Karen Ramos took the mic. Her words were measured. Final. "We've concluded the initial investigation. Based on the Langston Protocol's activation and its resulting data stream, we are recommending the following federal actions." She read from a printed list. Mandatory ethics compliance auditing across all major U.S. carriers, creation of a passenger dignity compliance board, with minority and disability representation. Industry-wide implementation of the Sky Ethics Evaluation System, based on Zuri Langston's case. Immediate ethics retraining for all flight attendants and gate agents within 90 days, reinstatement of whistleblower protections in airline HR systems. The chamber broke into applause. Zuri didn't smile. She just looked down at her mother's silver card, resting in her pocket. Later that afternoon, while exiting the building, Zuri was approached by a woman in a gray suit. "I'm with the White House Transportation Reform Team," she said. Zuri blinked. "Me?" The woman handed her a sealed envelope. "Madam Secretary wants to speak with you, privately. She says your mom's system wasn't just ahead of its time. It may become the foundation for a new federal charter." Zuri's hand trembled slightly as she took the envelope. She said what? She said, and I quote, "Zuri Langston didn't just sit in seat 1A, she reset the map." That night, as Zuri sat by the hotel window overlooking Washington, D.C., she opened her phone. Notifications were exploding. Langston Protocol trends worldwide. Passenger Dignity Act in early draft. 13-year-old sparks ethics reform. Her mother flew planes. She's redefining the sky. Zuri opened a video message from her grandmother. "Baby girl, I'm proud of you. But remember, this isn't about being famous. It's about being faithful to what's right. That's the real legacy." Zuri leaned her head against the glass, and for the first time in days, she smiled. A real smile. Not because she had won, but because she hadn't stayed silent. The email subject line read, Aurora Link Flight 342. Internal misconduct. Urgent. It was sent anonymously. No greeting, no sign-off. Just 3 attachments and a short message. This isn't the first time. You just finally got a kid with a last name that scared them. Within 10 minutes, it had reached the FAA Ethics Board, the DOJ Civil Rights Division, and the private inbox of Karen Ramos. It was about to shake everything, because whoever had sent it wasn't guessing. They had receipts. 1 hour earlier, inside the employee lounge of Aurora Link's Queens Regional HQ, Tessa Monroe sat with her coffee untouched. Her badge, FA 3972, still hung from her lanyard, but her hands were trembling. She had worked for the airline for 17 years, never late, never reprimanded. She'd survived budget cuts, route merges, and even a mid-air emergency over Denver. But what she saw on Flight 342 broke something inside her. Because Tessa had been right there, 2 rows behind Zuri Langston, and she saw everything. The look on Rachel's face when she spotted a black girl in seat 1A, the subtle switch in tone, the way she leaned over without scanning the boarding pass and said, "Sweetheart, I think you're lost." She saw how the other crew members just went along with it. And then she saw Zuri, calm, quiet, composed, tap her bracelet. No yelling, no threats, no begging, just silent control. And a moment later, the ethos grid turned red. Now, sitting in that break room, Tessa clicked send. She attached 3 key pieces. Video she secretly recorded on her phone of Rachel mocking Zuri before boarding, saying, "We'll clean up the first-class seats. Don't need another TikTok teen trying to play princess." Internal chat logs from the crew's private app showing previous complaints about Rachel's behavior toward black and disabled passengers, all dismissed without follow-up. A report she filed 6 months ago, ignored by management, after witnessing Rachel try to downgrade another black woman's seat for attitude. 20 minutes after hitting send, her phone rang. Unknown number. She let it go to voicemail. Then her inbox lit up. Urgent. Internal review request. You are temporarily relieved of flight duties. Please report to legal compliance at 2:30 p.m. Tessa exhaled slowly. She had pulled the pin. Now she had to live with the boom. Across the city, in the FAA's Emergency Ethics Suite, Karen Ramos read the attached logs line by line. Her expression changed, from concerned to disturbed to furious. She looked up at her team. This goes beyond one flight. This is a systemic suppression of complaints. The patterns are consistent, and the dismissals are deliberate. Internal protection rings? Someone asked. Karen nodded. Looks like it. HR buried 3 complaints by the same staffer, all linked to Rachel Myers, all dismissed, all involving passengers of color. What do we do now? She didn't hesitate. Call the airline CEO and activate the cross-airline integrity audit. This just went federal. Meanwhile, Zuri sat with her grandmother in a quiet New York cafe. The cameras were gone for now. So were the microphones, lawyers, and administrators. She was just a 13-year-old girl, sipping hot chocolate, trying to understand how the world had tilted overnight. Her grandmother put a hand over hers. You okay, baby? I think so. I just didn't expect so many people to care. Her grandmother smiled. Sometimes the world just needs a spark, and you lit the sky. Zuri looked down. But what if they say I only did this because of my last name? Her grandmother leaned in. Your name didn't save you, Zuri. It reminded them who your mother was, but you saved yourself, with grace, with truth, and with that quiet power of yours Maya always admired. Zuri nodded slowly, but before she could respond, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Clara. They're calling her out. It's happening. Someone on your flight spoke up. Zuri stared at the screen. Who? She whispered. In the airline's headquarters, chaos had cracked through the glass walls of the C-suite. The CEO, Martin Kerrigan, paced as legal teams flooded his office. Why the hell didn't I know about these internal reports? He snapped. His chief of HR paled. They were marked as resolved. "They were buried," he shouted. Then came the call from the FAA. Karen Ramos. Direct. The room fell quiet as Kerrigan took the phone. "Martin, we've initiated a federal audit across your airline's crew behavior history. The documents submitted today prove internal misconduct. If your team doesn't cooperate fully, you will be facing civil and criminal liability." He swallowed hard. What do you want us to do?" Her voice was cold and clear. "Start with a public apology, fire the people responsible, and let the girls speak." Back at Queens Regional HQ, Tessa was in a small white room with 2 lawyers and an HR officer. The silence stretched. One lawyer finally said, "You understand you violated protocol by recording another crew member." Tessa folded her hands. And how many protocols did she violate when she humiliated that child? When she joked about cleaning out the first-class section? "You're risking your pension." "I already lost my pride the day I kept quiet." The room was quiet again. Then the HR officer cleared her throat. "We appreciate your courage. There's a federal team requesting to meet with you, and we've been advised not to proceed with any disciplinary action." Tessa blinked. "So, I'm not being fired?" "Not today," the officer said. By the evening news cycle, the story had evolved again. Whistleblower steps forward in Flight 342 scandal. Video leaks show pattern of discrimination in Aurora Link crew. FAA opens criminal investigation into internal suppression of ethics complaints. Zuri watched the segment with her grandmother in the hotel. The anchor said it plainly. This isn't about a child in seat 1A anymore. This is about how many people were told they didn't belong and how many others stayed silent until one little girl spoke up. Her grandmother muted the TV. Zuri didn't say anything for a while. Then she whispered, "I wish I could hug her." Who? The person who sent that email. That night, Tessa returned home and found a small envelope in her mailbox. No return address. Inside was a folded sheet of paper, typed, no signature. "You saw me when no one else did. Thank you, 1A." Tessa sat down on her front steps and cried, not from fear, but from the weight of silence finally lifted. The press conference wasn't supposed to be live, but someone at the FAA thought the public deserved to witness what accountability actually looked like in real time. So, at 2:07 p.m. on a Tuesday, the stream went live on every major news outlet. No delay, no PR filters, just the world watching a 13-year-old girl, who never raised her voice, face the woman who tried to erase her. Zuri sat next to her grandmother, her feet barely reaching the floor. The seal of the Department of Transportation glimmered behind them. Her braids were pulled back into a neat bun. No makeup, no stylist, just a soft navy dress and quiet strength. On the opposite side of the room sat Rachel Myers, former senior flight attendant, no longer employed, no longer protected. She hadn't seen Zuri since that moment in first class, the moment she leaned over and said, "You sure this is your seat?" with a forced smile, masking entitlement. And now her forced smile was gone. The moderator, Dr. Evelyn Monroe, began. "We are convening this public session to fulfill the transparency clause under the Federal Passenger Ethics Reform Act, in light of the Aurora Link 342 incident." Zuri didn't blink. Rachel sat rigid, avoiding her gaze. Dr. Monroe turned to Zuri. "Miss Langston, do you feel comfortable making a statement?" Zuri nodded, then leaned forward. "I didn't ask for this," she said quietly. "I just wanted to sit in the seat my mother booked for me. The seat she picked out because she believed I deserved comfort. Not because I earned it, not because I was rich, but because she was gone, and she knew that flight would be hard." The room hushed. Zuri's voice never shook. "But I wasn't treated like a passenger. I was treated like a mistake." Across the country, thousands of screens flickered in hospitals, schools, airports, and senior centers. Viewers leaned closer. And for Karma Telltales' core audience, those who had lived through injustice in silence, this moment was more than a press event. It was recognition. Zuri continued. "No one asked for my name. No one checked my bracelet. They just saw me and decided I didn't belong. And when I spoke up, they made me feel like I was causing a scene, when they were the ones breaking the rules. Her grandmother reached for her hand under the table. Zuri held on, but kept her focus. I don't want revenge. I just want it to stop happening. To me, to anyone. She paused. Even to her. And then, she looked directly at Rachel. The silence that followed was unbearable. Rachel cleared her throat. I never meant to... Zuri raised one eyebrow. It was subtle, but the world caught it. Rachel's voice cracked. I didn't know who you were. Zuri nodded once. That was the problem. From the back of the room, Tessa Monroe, the whistleblower, stood quietly among the observers. She wasn't here to speak, but she needed to see this through. The world needed to see what happened when power tried to humiliate someone quietly and got exposed loudly. Then, Dr. Monroe addressed Rachel directly. Ms. Myers, you are under active investigation by the FAA and the DOJ's Civil Rights Division for prior documented cases of discriminatory conduct. In addition to your actions on Flight 342, Rachel opened her mouth to speak, but the room didn't want her words anymore. They wanted her silence. Then came the moment no one expected. Dr. Monroe turned to Zuri. There is an option. We've reviewed the Langston memo and the newly proposed Passenger Ethics Accord. As the activating passenger and primary subject, you are within your rights to suggest a restorative process. Would you like to? Zuri looked confused. Like a punishment? No, Monroe said gently. Like a path forward, if you want it. The camera zoomed in. Zuri looked at Rachel. Then, after a long pause, she said, make her fly, as a regular passenger. Every week, middle seat, no priority, no perks. Let her experience what it's like to be treated like she doesn't matter. Gasps rippled through the room. Zuri added, and when she's ready to apologize without saying, I didn't know, maybe she can teach the next training class. It wasn't vengeance. It was education in its rawest form. Later that evening, Zuri and her grandmother walked through the terminal where it all began. A mural had been installed outside Gate C-12, a black girl in silhouette, looking out a plane window. The words underneath read, You belonged the whole time. She stopped in front of it, took a breath, and whispered, She would have liked this. Her grandmother smiled. She would have demanded they make it bigger. Zuri laughed. Meanwhile, in a boardroom across town, Aurora Link's CEO, Martin Kerrigan, signed the final page of a new corporate ethics charter, co-authored by the FAA, DOJ, and 3 major civil rights organizations. The final clause read, No employee shall remain in service who participates in, ignores, or conceals passenger-based discrimination, intentional or perceived, in any form, under threat of federal license suspension. And right below that signature line was a name that stunned the room. Zuri Langston, Honorary Passenger Advocate. Back in the hotel, Zuri lay in bed, scrolling through her messages. Thousands of them. You made my granddaughter believe she belongs in science class. I'm 62, and I've been denied upgrades my whole life. Thank you. My daughter is autistic. You gave her a voice. We're naming our next plane after you. Zuri 1. She smiled at one last message from a woman she didn't know. The first time I flew first class, they asked me 3 times if I was lost. That was 1981. Today, they watched you remind the world we never were. Then came a soft knock. It was Clara, the kind flight attendant, holding a small box. I found this in the crew's locker. I think it was meant for you. Inside was a pendant, silver wings, tiny engraving on the back. Fly bold, fly true. Love, Mom. Zuri didn't say anything. She didn't need to. She just held it. And in that moment, the sky wasn't so far away anymore. It started with one clause, just a single sentence buried deep in a federal ethics charter. Passenger dignity shall be considered as fundamental to operational clearance as safety and fuel. But that sentence, backed by the name Zuri Langston, would change the aviation world in 7 days. At FAA headquarters in Washington, D.C., Karen Ramos stood before a panel of 27 stakeholders. To her left sat senior ethics officials from 4 agencies. To her right, a delegation from the Department of Transportation, the Civil Rights Division, and, unexpectedly, 2 quietly powerful names: Maya Langston's former colleagues, tech infrastructure experts now managing the aviation-linked SkyGrid platform. But seated in the center, as a non-voting witness, was the girl who had activated it all. Zuri Langston, age 13. She didn't speak at first. She didn't need to. They were all there because of her. Karen began. "You've read the reports. You've seen the fallout. But this isn't about a viral moment or a lawsuit. It's about a system that thought silence would last forever." She turned to the monitors behind her. One by one, data reports flashed across the screen. 36 formal complaints about passenger discrimination in the last 18 months. 0 resulted in employee termination. 0 resulted in federal investigation. 7 were buried internally by airline HR systems. And then came the damning slide. SkyGrid alert activation. Aurora Link Flight 342. Code 3B violation. Passenger-based bias suppression. Gasps filled the room. Someone whispered, "A child triggered that?" Karen nodded. "A child, and a legacy." She gestured toward Zuri. When Maya Langston co-authored the SkyGrid architecture, she included a dormant trigger protocol, one that would activate only when a systemic dignity violation occurred mid-air, unreported by crew. No one ever expected it would be used. Zuri finally spoke. "My mom did." The proposed legislation was called the Passenger Ethics Accord. Its core was simple, but ruthless. All airlines operating out of federal terminals must maintain a live ethics compliance score, tied to the FAA, DOJ, and SkyGrid. All crew complaints involving discrimination must be publicly logged and resolved within 21 days. Passengers can activate emergency ethics review during flight through encrypted biometric credentials, with real-time escalation. Airlines below the ethics threshold would lose clearance for key routes, investment fund ratings, and airport cooperation. As Karen listed the enforcement mechanisms, the air shifted. Because these weren't just reforms, they were structural disruptions. They touched on billions in investor capital, and the ones resisting knew it. But the FAA had an unlikely ace. Isabel Cruz, the CEO of one of the largest ESG-aligned airport investment funds, stepped forward. A soft-spoken woman in her 60s, she rarely made public appearances. She cleared her throat. 4 days ago, we downgraded Aurora Link's ethical viability rating after the Flight 342 incident. We've since frozen $740 million in pending funds, and we won't resume disbursement unless the accord is ratified. You could hear pens stop writing. Then she looked directly at Zuri. "My niece is your age. She stopped going to debate club because she said she felt invisible." She looked to the FAA panel. "I won't let another child think that's normal." Meanwhile, social pressure built. Across social media, the hashtag #TheAccordNow trended for 72 hours. Public figures, activists, and celebrities, many of whom once flew under aliases to avoid discrimination, posted videos holding up simple cards. "I'm not invisible. I'm a passenger. #TheAccordNow." Parents shared stories. Seniors recalled being ignored despite priority boarding. One woman, 78, posted, "The last time someone apologized for how I was treated on a plane, Eisenhower was president." It wasn't just a story anymore. It was a reckoning. On day 5, a key vote was scheduled. But 3 airlines, including Aurora Link, tried to stall. They argued the reforms were too aggressive, that one child's experience shouldn't dictate national policy. That was their mistake. Because 24 hours later, Zuri Langston was invited to testify before the Senate Oversight Committee. She didn't go in flanked by lawyers. She walked in holding her grandmother's hand. When asked to read her prepared remarks, she shook her head. "I didn't write anything. I already said what I had to say on that plane. But since you asked," she took a breath. "My mom helped build a system to protect people. She told me if anyone ever made me feel small on a flight, I could press my bracelet and something would listen even if the adults didn't. Some senators looked down. She built it, and I used it. And now you have to decide if it's just gonna sit there again, or actually mean something." On day 7, the FAA, DOJ, and Department of Transportation issued a joint statement. The Passenger Ethics Accord is hereby ratified as a mandatory condition of operational compliance. Airlines must adopt enforcement systems by Q3 or risk route suspension. Within the hour, Aurora Link's ethics score dropped below federal threshold. 94 flights were flagged for ethics audits. 6 airports paused cooperation. ESG funds began rerouting investment. Other airlines, afraid of being next, started internal purges. One tweet from a pilots' union summed it up best. "You didn't just spark change, Zuri. You rewired the sky." At home that night, Zuri lay on her bed, reading articles out loud. Her grandmother folded laundry nearby. Aurora Link ethics score falls to watch list. FAA suspension begins Friday. Passenger ethics accord triggers $3.2 billion capital shift. 13-year-old activist quietly reshapes aviation policy. Zuri sighed. "I didn't mean to do all this." Her grandmother smiled. "Sweetheart, you didn't mean to change the world. You just didn't let it change you." She walked over, kissed her on the forehead. "Now rest. Tomorrow's gonna be big." Because in the morning, Zuri would get on another plane. This time she'd sit in the first row again. But not because someone gave her permission, because she had rewritten the manual. Zuri Langston sat at the head of a long conference table in the FAA's secure briefing room. Around her, 10 CEOs and general counsels from every major U.S. carrier stared at her. Their logos glowed on the screens behind them. Silverwings, Skynova, Aerolink, Continental Choice, Altitude Air, and Meridian Express. Each was on the hook to sign the Langston Charter, the ethics document Maya Langston had drafted a year earlier, and which every airline had quietly shelved. Zuri tapped the silver bracelet on her wrist. The room fell silent. "Good morning," she said, voice calm. "You all know why you're here. A 13-year-old girl activated a protocol that froze $3.2 billion in ESG funds and grounded 152 flights. Now you have 2 options." She paused, scanning their faces. "Sign this charter today, or face nationwide route suspensions and federal license reviews." She slid a printed copy of the charter across the table, a neat 10-page document with clear, enforceable clauses. Mandatory public reporting of all discrimination complaints within 48 hours. Independent ethics audits every 6 months. Real-time ethics score displayed in airport apps. Whistleblower protections with guaranteed legal counsel. Zero tolerance for crew or gate agents who suppress complaints. Immediate suspension. A few executives shifted uncomfortably. One cleared his throat. "We need time to consult our boards," he began, glancing at his counsel. Zuri shook her head. 2 hours. You have 2 hours to decide. I'm flying back at 6 p.m. They broke for recess. Outside, Clara, now airline ombudsman, met Zuri in the hallway. "You're giving them an hour and a half," Clara said. "That's generous." Zuri offered a small smile. "I'm not in this to crush them. I'm here so it never happens again." They walked past uniformed employees who nodded respectfully. Word had spread that Seat 1A was no longer just Maya's honor. It was Zuri's office. Meanwhile, each CEO called their legal department. In boardrooms from Chicago to Los Angeles, lawyers sprinted to draft compliance plans. Investor relations teams scrambled to reassure funds. PR chiefs prepped apologies ready to go live the moment the charter was signed. At Meridian Express, CFO Daniel Cho muttered to his team, "We lose this vote, we lose billions in future capital. Ship it." At Sky Nova, CEO Linda Barrett slammed the table. No negotiations, we sign. Full stop. And at Continental Choice, the founder, a retired 3-star general, declared, "If a little girl can outmaneuver us, I say we learn from her." Back in the FAA chamber, the CEOs reconvened, papers in hand, signatures ready. Zuri stood as the first pen touched page 1. "Signed," she said softly. One by one, they followed. Nicknames scrawled beneath each signature. By 2:47 p.m., the Langston Charter was officially federal policy. Zuri felt a wave of relief, and something else. The quiet satisfaction of systemic change. She left the room and found a short corridor where news crews waited behind glass. The lead reporter asked, "Miss Langston, how does it feel to rewrite aviation history?" She paused, thinking of her mother's voice. "Change the sky. It feels right," she said. "It's not about making headlines. It's about making sure everyone, everywhere, knows dignity doesn't start or end with a boarding pass." Domino effects rippled immediately. Sky Nova announced live ethics score dashboards at the gate. AeroLink activated a 24/7 whistleblower hotline. Silverwings launched mandatory bias awareness retreats for crew. Continental Choice publicly rehired Tessa Monroe as ethics advisor, praising her courage. Passengers opened airport apps to find small green check marks next to every flight number, a reassurance that customer dignity was now equal to safety checks. That evening, Zuri flew home in first class, this time by invitation, not necessity. She curled into seat 1A, looked out the window, and exhaled. She'd spent the last 12 months building toward this moment, and now she felt the gentle lift of new winds. Her phone buzzed. A text from Clara. "Just got the news. Whistleblowers from 3 other airlines stepped forward today. They had stories like Tessa's. They're coming forward." Zuri smiled. Change was spreading faster than she dared hope. Later, at home in Atlanta, Zuri's grandmother prepared dinner while Zuri sat at the kitchen island, reviewing emails. One subject caught her eye. Invitation, Global Civil Rights Summit, London. It was from a prominent human rights NGO, asking her to speak about the Charter's international model. She leaned back, thinking of her mom's last words. "If I can't change the skies for me, I'll do it for her." Zuri dialed her grandmother. "Nana, London." On speaker, her grandmother's proud voice echoed. "You're going to remind the world that dignity is universal." Before bed, Zuri placed her silver bracelet on her nightstand and opened Maya's old journal. On one page was a hastily scribbled note. "Systems outlast people. Build a system that doesn't forget." Zuri traced the words with her finger and nodded. She didn't want to be a one-time hero. She wanted to be the guardian Maya always envisioned. And now she was. News of the Langston Charter's sweep had barely settled when the first domino fell where it all began. In Aurora Link's cramped human resources office, Rachel Myers stared at a terse email on her screen. "Your employment with Aurora Link is terminated, effective immediately. We'll send your final paycheck within 10 business days." She'd expected a suspension, maybe a mandatory retraining. Not this. Her hands trembled as she closed her laptop. The hum of fluorescent lights felt oppressive. Outside, she could hear the distant roar of jet engines. The very thing she once considered routine. That afternoon, Rachel was escorted to the gate at Denver International Airport. A single security officer walked her past stunned passengers. Some recognized her. Others just watched in disbelief. A young mother with a toddler looked up as they passed. The child's eyes widened but didn't cry. The toddler knew something was wrong, didn't know why. By evening, Rachel's name was everywhere. Aurora Link fires flight attendant over discrimination scandal. Letting go or letting go too late? Do tenure and seniority protect bias? She retreated to her apartment in the suburbs, lights off, blinds drawn. The silence was deafening. That night, she did what she'd avoided all week. She watched the viral clip, In it, 13-year-old Zuri Langston sat quietly as Rachel challenged her ticket. Viewers saw each sneer, each dismissive glance. Then, the moment Zuri tapped the silver card. Then the cabin's shift, Rachel's face paling, and finally the teenager's composure. Rachel felt a fresh wave of shame. She'd always thought of herself as fair, professionally ruthless, she'd told friends. But she hadn't even noticed her own prejudice until it was thrust into the global spotlight. The next morning, Aurora Link's PR team released a brief statement. Ms. Myers' conduct did not align with Aurora Link's core values, nor with the new Passenger Ethics Accord. We stand by our decision. That wasn't nearly enough for the court of public opinion. On social media, hashtags morphed. Hashtag Rachel Watch List. Middle seat. For Rachel, first class of humility. An online petition quickly garnered 500,000 signatures. Demand Rachel issue a full apology on live TV in prime time. Cornered, Rachel agreed. That evening, she appeared on a national talk show. The set was bright. The audience hushed. The host leaned in. Rachel, why should viewers believe you've changed? Rachel took a deep breath. I was wrong. I reacted to someone's face, not her merit. I let bias guide me. Her voice cracked. I'm sorry, Zuri. I wish I'd done better. I wish I'd seen you. A collective sigh filled the studio. But as she spoke, comments exploded online. Too little, too late. Her words still carry that old tone. I hoped for accountability, not just an apology. Even the host noted the lukewarm reaction. It sounds genuine, but many are asking, what's next? How will you prove it? Rachel swallowed. I don't have an answer yet, but I intend to find one. Outside the studio, Clara, now Aurora Link's ethics advisor, recorded Rachel's statement for the HR file. Clara shook her head. Professional pride can be a tough armor to dismantle, she said quietly. Rachel looked at her. Thank you, Clara, for everything. Clara nodded. Just remember, humility isn't a one-time act. It's a daily choice. A week later, Rachel found herself walking past Gate C12 again, where the mural of Zuri stood. She paused, tracing the silhouette with her eyes. You belong the whole time. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and touched the cold metal of the mural. She had lost her job. Her reputation lay in tatters, and her apology barely made ripples. But now, she had a choice: to remain silent, or to step out of the shadow of her own prejudice and rebuild. One act of genuine respect at a time. As she walked on, she murmured, almost to herself, I'm ready to try. Zuri Langston had commanded the sky. She'd rewritten aviation policy, faced down CEOs, and become a symbol of justice. Yet tonight, in her Atlanta home, she felt more like a 13-year-old girl than anything else. At the kitchen table, her grandmother set down a plate of warm cornbread and stewed greens. Eat something, she urged gently. Zuri picked at the bread. I'm fine, she said, though her voice wavered. Her grandmother sat beside her. You did a lot today, baby, even beyond signing that charter. Zuri stared at her plate. People think it was just about being denied 1A, but it was never about the seat. She took a deep breath. Mom used to tell me, if you're judged by your cover, they'll never read your story. I learned that after her grandmother reached over and squeezed her hand. I know, sweetheart. Zuri's eyes filled. She pressed on. Maya wasn't just a pilot. She was one of the best test pilots at Langston Aerotech. She tested new safety protocols, flew experimental routes, and was 2 flights away from her promotion to captain when they quietly reassigned her. Her voice caught. They said she wasn't the right. Look for a flagship campaign. They erased her record, took away her badge, and pushed her out. She never got to fly again. Her grandmother let tears slip. She told me she wouldn't stop until the system protected everyone, not just those with the right faces. Zuri nodded. That's why she built Ethos Track. And that bracelet? It wasn't just a tool. It was her promise to me, her legacy. Silence settled. Then her grandmother said, "And you honored that promise today, more than any trophy or speech could." Zuri wiped her eyes. "I miss her so much. I thought if I kept silent, it would keep her memory safe. But today, speaking up felt like finally giving her a voice." Her grandmother smiled. "Your voice was always her voice, and now it's everyone's." They sat together, the hum of the fridge the only sound. Outside, Atlanta's skyline glittered. Somewhere up there, planes continued to fly under the new rules Zuri helped enact. She closed her eyes and whispered, "I wish you could see this, Mom." Her grandmother kissed her head. "She does. Every time a flight takes off safely, every time a passenger is treated with respect, she's up there, smiling." Zuri nodded, a single tear tracing down her cheek. It was never about a seat. It was about dignity, about making sure no one else feels invisible. She stood, wiping her hands on a napkin. "I'm going to bed." Her grandmother watched her go, pride shining in her eyes. "Good night, my brave girl." And for the first time in a long while, Zuri felt at peace, knowing her mother's fight wasn't in vain, and that her own fight had only just begun. 2 years later, Zuri Langston stepped onto the tarmac of Denver International Airport. She wore a crisp navy blazer over a simple blouse, her silver bracelet glinting in the morning sun. Today was the inaugural flight of the Maya Langston Honor Seat, Seat 1A, forever reserved in her mother's name. The airport was quiet at dawn, but word of the ceremony had drawn a small crowd. Former colleagues of Maya, airline executives turned allies, even passengers who'd once been denied upgrades. Clara, now Director of Passenger Ethics at Aurora Link, met Zuri with a proud smile. "Ready?" Clara asked, handing her a pale yellow rose. Zuri nodded. "Always." They walked together through the jet bridge. Inside, the cabin gleamed with fresh upholstery, and on every headrest beside 1A was an embroidered patch, a silver wing etched with Maya's initials. At Seat 1A, Zuri paused. She placed the rose on the armrest. Beneath the tray table was a discreet plaque, in honor of Captain Maya Langston, Advocate, Innovator, Guardian of Dignity. She snapped a quick photo, then turned to the small stage set up by the galley door. A podium bore the Aurora Link logo and the words, "Legacy in Flight." First, Clara spoke. "Today we celebrate more than a seat. We honor the woman whose vision compelled us to treat every single passenger with respect. No exceptions." Then came a video montage. Maya, in uniform. Maya, designing Ethos Track. Maya, hugging a young Zuri. The montage ended with news clips of Zuri's whistleblowing, the charter signing, and the countless flights now scored in green. Finally, Zuri stepped up. Her voice was steady. "Mom once told me that a system outlives its creators. She built a tool to ensure dignity, even when people forget it's required. Today, Seat 1A isn't just a place to sit. It's a reminder, no matter how small you feel, you belong here." She looked around the cabin, at passengers boarding for the early flight. One elderly woman paused to read the plaque, nodded, then slid into 1A with reverent care. Zuri smiled. "Fly with pride, fly with respect, and always remember who you are." The applause was warm but brief. Zuri returned to her rose, tucked it into the mesh pocket, and took her seat beside it. As the plane pushed back, she gazed out at the wing cutting through clouds tinted gold by sunrise. Her phone buzzed. A notification, 100,000 flights now displaying live ethics scores. She tapped her bracelet lightly. No override needed today, because the system her mother built, and she helped implement, was fully awake. The engines roared to life. The seatbelt sign flicked off. A stewardess offered Zuri a cup of tea. The gesture was simple, genuine. Zuri took a sip and closed her eyes. In that quiet moment between takeoff and ascent, She felt her mother's presence, in the hum of the engines, in the steady climb above the earth, and in the knowledge that dignity would always have its place, right here in Seat 1A. If you could send Zuri a message right now, what would it be? Ask for quick encouragements or questions for her.